Hey, everybody. So it is Wednesday. It is the day that I normally do Eating at a Meeting live. And I think I'm an hour late. I actually am an hour late because I'm where am I? Texas. And so I'm doing it on 12 o'clock Texas time. So I have been on site for the last, oh my gosh, 2 weeks. And I just wanted to talk to you and share some things that I experienced, revelations that I had, or things that around food and beverage and just event planning. And it's going to be short and sweet because we're loading out. If you can see behind me, I've got tables that are getting torn down, exhibit booths that just got torn down for this one show. And so just wanted to talk through some things that I noticed while I was in two different properties. One is labels, labels, labels. When it comes to food and beverage, we have to be really diligent about labels, but we need to understand who's responsible for them. And one, the front of the house staff is responsible for them, and you need to find out when they know. One of the properties I worked with the pastries, the pastry captain does, or the pastry shop doesn't tell them what they're serving until the morning of. And so they're delivering them, and then they're making those signs for those pastries the morning of. Um, Actually, probably about 30 minutes before they go out onto the floor. So really honing in on your processes on how you want those done, and talking to the pastry chef as well as the hot chef and the garde manger chefs, understanding what their processes are in getting your food and beverage ready. One chef that I met over the course of 2 weeks, I was asking him about some food in the pre-con meeting, and it wasn't labeled. And so somebody brought him over to me, and I was like, I'd like to know, kind of what's in it, and because there's no label. And the chef said to me, he's like, I don't do the labeling. I just make the food. And I think there's a big disconnect in that conversation, because even though he's the one that makes the food and the front of the house is responsible for labeling, there's a dual responsibility there. And we need to make sure that our catering partners understand that, and that there is a responsibility in knowing what you're serving. And if you as a chef don't share the ingredients with the people who are making your labels, you're just as responsible for somebody getting sick. And we need to make sure as planners that we're having that communication with our chefs across the board. And I know it's challenging, but make sure that you're putting this information in, maybe your pre-con, well, before your pre-con, but in your contracts, that you want things labeled a specific way, and then reiterate that in the pre-cons. And I try to do my best in getting to proof those labels beforehand. I was actually told I was going to be able to proof them at one event, and I didn't actually get to proof them until the morning of. So it's a little rushed, and that's where a lot of things get done wrong or done incorrectly, not intentionally, but they get left off. So definitely figure out that process of how you're going to do that labeling and who's going to be responsible for that. And I think one of the things, and at my second meeting, my client is allergic to dairy, is allergic to pork, and I wasn't in charge of food and beverage for the second one. So it's really important to spell this information out of how you're going to be labeling. And as a planner, if you want it done, then you need to ask for it in advance. You can't just assume that they're going to do that. It needs to be in your BEOs. It needs to be in any kind of communications that you have, your event resumes, etc. So make sure that it's spelled out as much as you possibly can for everyone to understand, and make sure it's getting to all of the different chefs. The second thing was about food waste. So one property I was at, they actually have big blue bins that they put all the food that's scraped from plates into those blue bins, and they are taken to an offsite composting facility to compost, and then turned into mulch and things like that. They don't donate. My CSM at that property was working. I sent her the information on the Good Samaritan Act and the Food Donation Improvement Act, so that she can communicate that to her chef, because the answer back from her chef was that we don't donate. Well, under the Good Samaritan Act and the Food Donation Improvement Act, we can donate. Properties can donate as long as it's time and temperature controlled, and we really need to be looking at how we're managing that waste. Um, one, and then also, what are we doing with the food scraps after the fact? So the property I'm at now and leaving, they do donate to the food bank, and they are working on implementing the composting practices back into the property, so that they are actually doing that as well. So, but again, I wasn't in charge of food and beverage for the second program. So, but we need to make sure that we're putting that information in when we're doing our RFPs, when we're doing our contracting, and find out how it's being done and with whom, because it's really important to be able to save, not waste the food. And on speaking about not wasting the food, one of the ways that I do that, is, eh, on have a good day. Um, with that, for breaks, right? So for my morning break and my afternoon break, the morning break, I used any leftover pastries and fruit on that morning break, so that we weren't ordering additional food for that morning break, because they just had breakfast an hour and a half ago. They don't need a lot of other things. So instead of throwing that food away, we use it in the morning break. And then for our afternoon break, we use the desserts from lunch as that afternoon break, because again, they don't need sugar and dessert at lunch and then have sugar and dessert again an hour and a half, 2 hours later. So saving that cost on that, but also saving that food. And when you're doing that too, is looking at, that, I mean, think about how many desserts get go uneaten when you do a plated meal and you actually serve the desserts. If you've paid attention to that, probably not as much. Nobody ever eats all of them. So when you're doing that for that afternoon break, make sure you're ordering under what you ordered for your lunch. And so that you're not ordering excess and it's being thrown away at the end. Because once it's put out on the out for service, it has to be composted or put in the trash, preferably composted. But looking at ways that you can do that, but managing it. But these are things that you can't just do on the fly and figure out, what they're going to do after, on site. You need to plan for this in advance, because you need to find the donation companies, etc. Um, the cost of alcohol. The cost of alcohol is huge. It's really big. I did find out a calculation, um, on bar packages, because at one of our events, we had a company that was exhibiting a smart bar. Oh shoot, I forgot the name of it exactly, but the smart bar, and it actually is a machine that pours cocktails with the push of a button, and it's really cool. It is actually, instead of eliminating jobs, it's actually helping, streamline the bartender jobs, especially in some casinos, and allowing the servers to get their drinks out faster with more accuracy, no over pouring, and less waste. But the gentleman wanted to use alcohol, do tastings, of that, at the show. Well, the hotel is selling those bottles. Say a hotel is calculating, they sell cocktails on our banquet menu for $15, $18 a glass, right? And then they can get 26 drinks out of a bottle. So they're going to multiply the 18 times 26, and whatever that math is, that's how much they're charging that vendor for that bottle. So thinking about that, that's the cost of that, and that's how they're calculating those costs. So that was a very eye-opening, data calculation for me on that bottle. And they, of course, won't let alcohol from outside come in. So we ended up using juice and water for his samples. But just understanding those kind of calculations, and it was probably also going to be taxed and gratuity on top of that. And they actually were going to have a staff person from the hotel in the booth with them when they were doing that. So that actually added additional time or additional cost to that, because they actually had to pay for the labor for that. Managing your counts. And I this is it's kind of challenging, and you want to know your counts, how many people actually came through your events, right? And I downloaded a ticker, on my phone, to count people as they were walking through the door on breakfast. And um but or managing by rolls or managing by plates, right? Counting those and figuring out how many people came through. One of the challenges I found in our counts was when you had an omelet station and then the buffet. I had a continental breakfast and then I added an omelet station on top of that. So people were taking plates from two different tables. So really honing in on how you're counting, that's really when you want to make sure that you're counting per person who come through the door, not necessarily by plate, because they will be getting a separate plate potentially going from two different buffets. So working with your banquet captains and your banquet servers on how they're doing those counts is really important. And it's really important to manage your counts, to understand the history of how many people came through at what times, and so that when you're figuring out your calculations for the next event, you can actually have a better accuracy of your numbers. So the event last week, our breakfast was open at 7 and it closed at 8:30. We had people showing up at 6:45, 6:40 in the morning, and they were cleared out by 8 because the first breakfast was at 8. And I probably had 20 people come through the buffet between 8 and 8:30. So we really could adjust our times for that breakfast, maybe make it from 7 to 8 instead, or 6:45 to 8, but really tracking those numbers so that we know how many people are coming through and when that time frame is going. And same thing with your lunches. One thing that really saved me for lunch this time, or the program last week, is we had 700 people and we had an hour for lunch. And the space that we had, we did not have room to put a buffet up, and a buffet for 700 people. That would have been multiple tables, multiple lines, and it would have taken quite a bit of time. So what we actually did was we did a plated lunch, which also saved me $12 per person, and we did not preset the water and iced tea. I made water and iced tea stations on the side. As people came in the door, I suggested that they get water and iced tea, and before they sat down, and then go find a seat. We loaded them to the back of the room first, and then filled into the back. It saved so much time. People, when they sat down, the salads were preset. They ate their salad and then their entree was brought to them. And again, the dessert was after the fact. It saved and streamlined the timing of that lunch so well. And it saved me $15, $12 to $15 per person. It really worked well. And the hotel was hesitant about the iced tea and the water stations. It worked like a dream. It was great. And it helped me not preset water and iced tea that weren't going to be drunk. So, and just be thrown out. So helping that's a huge sustainability savings there. We did it for every single one of our lunches and it worked like a charm. So that's another way to think about that if you're not doing that. And also making sure that tea and water is on request at your dinners or anything like that, so that you're not pouring out and using excess water, especially since my one event was in the desert and I didn't want to waste water in the desert. Um, and then donations. Well, I kind of talked about donations and the food waste as well, but making sure that you are donating. We, at this event that we're clearing out now, we actually created in the exhibit hall, which is what I was responsible for at this event. We created a relaxation lounge, and I was pricing it out, the furniture, and it ended up being better for me to go to a lot less expensive, probably a quarter of the price, to go to IKEA and buy the furniture for this lounge. We had 8 chairs, 2 couches, 4 rugs, fake plants, and 8 tables, and it cost me $1,500. And renting them I would have probably gotten 3 or 4 pieces from that. And I ended up donating them to a local school. And so they just came and picked them up this morning, and now they're going to be used in that local high school, for those kids, especially during the summer school program. So really thinking through that. One of our exhibitors has excess popcorn. We're donating that to the food bank. We're donating other things from the registration desk, the extra volunteer t-shirts, extra food, and bottled water from our golf tournament. Those are all being donated to another school as well. So really think about how you can donate different products and services, or different products, things left over from your trade show, from your event, etc. So those are some of the quick things that I wanted to pop in and tell you about today from these two events. I'm excited to be headed home today. I've got another one next week for a group of 80-year-old men and their spouses, but I'm excited, and I will be back I'll be back in 2 weeks because I'm on site next week as well. But um, there have been downloads on the audio version of it, so check out Eating at a Meeting on all your favorite on your favorite podcast platforms. It's available, and I will until then stay safe and eat well. Thank you.